Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Anita Anand and with me is Renuka Ares, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairs a high-level meeting on Indian response to Ukraine situation. Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla says 12,000 Indian nationals out of 20,000 have left Ukraine so far. New Delhi to send 26 flights to bring out Indian citizens in next 3 days from Ukraine. 9th Operation Ganga flight reaches New Delhi from Bucharest, Romania. An Indian student killed in shelling in Kharkiv, Ukraine. Government issues fresh advisory for Indians to leave Kiev urgently. Union Minister General retired V.K. Singh reaches Poland to aid the evacuation of Indian citizens in Ukraine. Switzerland announces to forgo Swiss neutrality and adopt sanctions against Russia for its military operation in Ukraine. And in shooting, Saurabh Chaudhary clinches India's first gold medal at the ongoing International Sport Federation World Cup in Cairo, Egypt. With the new Omicron variant of coronavirus causing concern, we appeal to our listeners to be vigilant and to get fully vaccinated and help others, including children between 15 and 18 years, to get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact national helpline numbers 01123978046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a high-level meeting on Ukraine issue in Delhi on Tuesday evening. This was his 3rd such meeting on the issue. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Union Minister Piyush Goyal, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval were among those who attended the meeting. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met President Ramnath Kovind at Rashtrapati Bhavan on Tuesday and briefed him on various issues including Ukraine. Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla on Tuesday said 12,000 Indian nationals have left Ukraine so far. Of the remaining 8,000, 4,000 are in conflict zone and others have either reached the western borders of Ukraine or are heading there. Briefing the media in New Delhi this evening, he said there were an estimated 20,000 Indians in Ukraine at the time of the release of the first advisory.
We had an estimated 20,000 Indian students in Ukraine at the time that we issued our first advisory. This is the general number of people who are Indian nationals in Ukraine. And from that number, 12,000 approximately have since left Ukraine, which is 60% of the total number of our citizens in Ukraine. Of the remaining 40%, roughly half remain in the conflict zone in the Kharkiv, Sumy area, and the other half have either reached the western borders of Ukraine or are heading towards the western borders of Ukraine. In other words, they are generally out of the conflict areas, out of harm's way.
The Foreign Secretary said the 3rd meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the Ukraine issue on Tuesday evening began with an expression of deep regret and condolences at the death of the Indian student in Ukraine. The Prime Minister conveyed his deep anguish at the loss of life of an Indian national. Mr. Shringla said that the External Affairs Ministry had sent a team of officers from Indian mission in Moscow to border region of Russia joining Ukraine. This team is currently in a city called Belgorod, which is not far from Kharkiv.
We have sent a team of officers from our mission in Moscow to the border region of Russia adjoining Ukraine. This team is currently in a city called Belgorod, which is not far from Kharkiv. The function of the team is to examine all the options in terms of the route out, accommodation for our people, the transportation options. Essentially, this team is in place and ready to see whatever we can do to extract our students and citizens from the Kharkiv Sumy area.
The Foreign Secretary said since the issue of the advisory asking Indians to leave Kiev, all Indian nationals have left the city. He said another 1,400 citizens who are in the southern town of Ukraine have also moved towards western parts of Ukraine. 400 students have been able to cross through to Moldova. The MEA team is there to facilitate their movement to Bucharest. The Prime Minister has sent 4 union ministers to Poland, Slovak Republic, Hungary and Romania. Over the next 3 days, 26 flights have been scheduled to bring out Indian citizens. Apart from Bucharest and Budapest, airports in Slovakia and Poland will also be used. A C-17 Indian Air Force aircraft will leave on Wednesday at 4 p.m. and reach Romania to repatriate Indians. More Indian Air Force flights will be mounted in the coming days.
In order to scale up ongoing evacuation efforts under the Operation Ganga, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for the Indian Air Force to join evacuation efforts. According to sources, leveraging the capacities of our Air Force will ensure that more people can be evacuated in a shorter time frame. It will also help deliver humanitarian aid more efficiently. The Indian Air Force is likely to deploy several C-17 aircraft as part of Operation Ganga from today. The 9th Operation Ganga flight has reached New Delhi from Bucharest, Romania. It was carrying 218 Indian nationals. An Indian student has lost his life in shelling in Kharkiv, Ukraine on Tuesday morning. In a series of tweets, the External Affairs Ministry conveyed its deepest condolences to the family. The ministry said it is in touch with his family. It informed that the Foreign Secretary is calling in ambassadors of Russia and Ukraine to reiterate India's demand for urgent safe passage for its nationals who are still in Kharkiv and cities in other conflict zones. Similar action is also being undertaken by the Indian ambassadors in Russia and Ukraine. Official sources said India had already taken up with the Russian and Ukraine embassies the pressing requirement of safe passage for Indian nationals, including students from Kharkiv and other cities in conflict zones. This demand has been repeatedly made of Russia and Ukraine since the beginning of this conflict on 24th of February. The sources also said it is imperative that Russia and Ukraine respond to India's need for safe passage urgently. From the Indian side, the preparations for evacuation have been in place for some time now.
The Embassy of India in Kiev, Ukraine, has advised all Indian nationals, including students, to leave Kiev by Tuesday. Tweeting about it, it said they should do it preferably by available trains or through any other means available. Union Minister of State for Civil Aviation General Retired V.K. Singh has arrived in Poland to oversee the evacuation efforts of Indian nationals stranded in Ukraine. After reaching there, he met a group of Indian students staying at a Gurudwara at Warsaw in Poland. The Indian government had taken the decision to send special envoys comprising union ministers to 4 neighbouring nations of Ukraine. Besides General V.K. Singh, the other union ministers are Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, Law Minister Kiren Rijiju, Housing and Urban Affairs Minister Hardeep Puri. These special envoys will coordinate and oversee the evacuation process on the ground.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that their cities are now blocked, but his countrymen are defiantly fighting for their land and freedom. In a virtual address to the European Parliament on Tuesday, Zelensky said that nobody is going to break them. They are strong. They are Ukrainians. Zelensky urged the European Union to prove that it was on Ukraine's side in its war with Russia. He had signed off an official request to join the bloc on Monday. The Ukraine crisis has aggravated with reports of Russian forces bombarding the central square in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, and other civilian cities on Tuesday. In the capital city, Kyiv, the TV tower was hit. Ukraine's parliament posted a photo of clouds of smoke around it. Local media reported that there were several explosions, and Ukrainian TV channels stopped broadcasting shortly afterward. According to agency reports, a 64-kilometer convoy of hundreds of Russian tanks and other vehicles advanced on Kyiv. Meanwhile, Russian troops pressed their military action on other towns and cities across the country, including near the strategic ports of Odessa and Mariupol in the south. In Kharkiv, at least 6 people were killed when the region's Soviet-era administrative building was hit. Kharkiv's Freedom Square, Ukraine's largest plaza and the nucleus of public life in the city, was struck. In another development, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court said he plans to open an investigation into possible war crimes in the invasion.
Switzerland has announced that it will forego Swiss neutrality and adopt sanctions against Russia for its military operation in Ukraine. Swiss federal president Ignacio Cassis has said that it will forego its commitment to Swiss neutrality in favor of adopting sanctions against Russia. He said Switzerland's sanctions will be in line with those already adopted by the European Union. Speaking after an extraordinary meeting of the Swiss Federal Council, Cassis stressed that in these dark days, Switzerland stands in solidarity with the people of Ukraine and hopes that sanctions will encourage the Kremlin to change its mind. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Operation Ganga and developments in Ukraine. Commodore retired C. Uday Bhaskar, security analyst, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, journalist.
India on Monday said it managed to accelerate efforts to evacuate its nationals from various border crossings along the border of Ukraine with Romania, Hungary, Poland and Slovakia. And we have also tried to open a route from Moldova to bring back some Indians to Romania and then to India. So how do you see the overall evacuation mission, Christian, Operation Ganga?
I think the entire Indian collective is supporting their swift return to India in a safe and stable manner. And I think towards that end, the effort of the government, which has now been called Operation Ganga, is to be welcomed. Because in any conflict situation, the first priority of the government is to ensure the safety and security of its citizens. And the Modi government is to be commended for making this effort on this scale. Because if you recall, in the past, there have been situations both during the COVID and earlier, for instance, during the war in Lebanon in 2006. India had mounted operations to bring back stranded citizens. But this time, if you look at the way in which the government has tried to reach out to the citizens, 4 cabinet ministers have been deputed to ensure coordination. And we are already seeing on social media the images and the messages that are coming, which in a way, I think because of the connectivity that social media now provides, it would be a kind of assurance to these largely young Indian students who are stranded in some very dangerous places. I know personally that some of them have been reaching out to our friends to indicate their current plight. So my response is to extend the solidarity to those Indian citizens who are stranded in Ukraine and to let them know through whatever medium of communication that reaches them that the government is making a very concerted effort, and we already have a number of aircraft that are ferrying these passengers. And I think the fact that the government has also indicated that they would be able to extend this help to those people from other countries in the neighborhood who are stranded is also to be commended. And one hopes that all of them reach safety in the shortest time frame.
Commodore Uday Bhaskar, the Prime Minister has been holding regular meetings in the last few days. On Monday, he held 2 meetings with senior ministers and top officials, asking them to expedite the evacuation process and also announcing humanitarian assistance to the bordering areas, witnessing massive influx of people in an attempt to cross over to the neighboring countries of Romania, Hungary, Poland and Slovak Republic. So Prime Minister in the second meeting on Monday, he very categorically said that the entire government machinery is working around the clock to ensure that all Indian nationals in Ukraine are safe and secure. This was said in a press release also by the Ministry of External Affairs. And as you said that Prime Minister instructed 4 senior ministers, designating them as his special envoys to various nations to energize the evacuation efforts. But considering the current situation, particularly in the conflict zones, even if India has been mounting a major diplomatic offensive effort reaching out to the Ukrainian side, Prime Minister Modi spoke to the Ukrainian President, External Affairs Minister spoke to the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Foreign Secretary has been in touch with the Ukrainian Ambassador in Delhi. At the same time, Prime Minister also spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Our Foreign Minister spoke to the Russian counterpart, Mr. Lavrov, and the Foreign Ministry mandarins are also in touch with the Russian embassy in Delhi as part of the whole of the government effort. Still, in fact, some of our citizens are stuck. In this kind of a situation, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, what should be the way out? How to just take out our citizens from the conflict zones?
The scale of the problem at this point is quite daunting, because Ukraine has been providing both employment and education to a large number of foreign citizens. And I understand that the Indian estimate is between 20,000 to 30,000 who are currently in Ukraine, both as students and as people working in other sectors of the Ukrainian economy. So you'll get an idea that if a country like India has about 30,000 people, there are many other nationalities, particularly from Africa and Asia, as also those from Europe, who are not Ukrainians but who are either studying or working in that country. And some estimates have put this number as almost at 250,000. Many of them are people who are also in transit, who are moving, so this number could be imprecise. But I think the immediate priority for all countries whose citizens are in Ukraine is to ensure that they are able to move westwards towards one of the bordering countries from where evacuation is being planned. Every country has its own logistic arrangements. So in the Indian case, I think today we have also seen the Prime Minister suggesting that the Indian Air Force would be brought to provide necessary assistance, along with some of the commercial airlines. So I think on one hand, we need to have a sense of the numbers and which are the countries they would be directed towards, because it also depends on connectivity within Ukraine, which is now completely disrupted. So those Indians who are closer to the Russian border may find it more difficult. That is on the eastern side of Ukraine, where the exits are not as appropriate as they ought to be. And currently there are certain constraints in terms of the ability to operate aircraft in a safe manner. So I think day by day we will have to get an estimate, and every evacuation is preceded by very detailed planning that the Ministry of External Affairs has done in the past. You will remember, for instance, when we had the first war in Iraq for Kuwait, we are talking about January 1991. Again, there was a massive lift and planning operation that had been conducted at that time, where the numbers were also in hundreds of thousands. So similarly, I think the planning process will have to be done in a very meticulous and careful way against the backdrop of a kinetic situation where there is violence and bloodshed. And I think the monitoring will have to be done literally in 12-hour cycles, and the government has set up these control rooms. And again, I repeat that India is not alone. We have seen reports of students, for instance, from African countries also being treated in a rather, shall we say, shabby manner because of a number of factors. And these are the kind of things that would have to be addressed in a very objective manner at this point. I think emotive responses would be counterproductive. And we should also acknowledge the role being played by the neighboring countries and their NGOs in providing whatever support they can. And all this is based on the social media trickle that we are all following. So my own, as I said, overall assessment is that this is a very complex and difficult situation. But I think we should be gratified that the government is giving it the highest attention. And the fact that cabinet ministers have also been pressed into service is indicative, I think, knowing fully well that for every operation, there are many uncertainties. And we have to see, I think, in 12-hour cycles, how many Indians have come back to safety. And I earnestly hope that India would also be able to bring the citizens of other neighboring countries. And this would be in keeping with what the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, had said. And the Ministry of External Affairs had also issued a statement, and I'm quoting from that, quote, guided by India's motto of the world being one family, Prime Minister Narendra Modi stated that India will help people from neighboring countries and developing countries stranded in Ukraine, unquote. So I do hope that we would be able to carry out this support for the other nationalities also.
Commander Udayvaskar, also in the meeting the Prime Minister held yesterday, during the second meeting, it was also decided to send humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. So how do you see this move when India has been maintaining the position that hostilities should immediately end, there should be respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity by all the states, in an indication that whatever Russia has been doing is not acceptable to India? It's a nuanced change of position to what we have said at the UNC on February 17th, February 21st, and February 23rd. But during the vote on UNSC resolution on the Ukraine crisis, India made it very clear that sovereignty and territorial integrity of the states must be respected. And flowing from that decision and the decision of yesterday to send humanitarian assistance to Ukraine to deal with the massive influx of refugees towards the neighboring countries. The people who are trying to exit Ukraine are crowding around the exit points, and there is a humanitarian crisis. In that kind of a situation, India deciding to send medical supplies, relief materials to help Ukraine deal with the situation along the border. So how do you see this decision by India?
No, this is a decision that again should be welcomed, because whenever there has been a humanitarian crisis of this scale, to the extent possible, India has provided necessary support, humanitarian and otherwise. Afghanistan, which is closer to us, is case in point. Now, you are aware that India had offered to provide assistance to Afghanistan, and only now, after a lot of bottlenecks were cleared, that aid is reaching the people, hapless citizens of Afghanistan. So in similar manner, the Ukraine crisis now has got a huge humanitarian dimension, as we can see. And we understand that the Indian Foreign Secretary, Mr. Shringla, has already been in touch with the Ukrainian ambassador, Mr. Igor Polika. And there has been some consultation about India providing humanitarian aid. How this will reach is, of course, I think a matter of detail. But there is no doubt in my mind that humanitarian aid is the need of the hour from every country and every institution which can provide it, for all those, irrespective of nationality, who are now stranded, because we are talking about basic things like food and water, medicines, shelter. This is the nature of any war, big or small, that in the first phase, the civilian population is completely convulsed. You know, the kind of disruptions that take place, particularly for the young, for the vulnerable, for the old, for everyone, irrespective of age and gender. And I think it is in that sense that the call for humanitarian aid is something that the global community should be able to respond to when there are all forms of communication which technology now enables, and medicines, critical kind of supply issues, which I'm sure the Ukrainian government has already been seeking. I've seen some requests of this nature on social media and on other platforms. And to the extent possible, neighboring countries are already supporting. But I think the scale is such that there has to be a plan again over the next week, over the next 2 weeks, till as the situation stabilizes. And I think India should also be part of that effort, because we have the kind of capacity that perhaps some of the smaller nations do not have. Concurrently, I've often maintained that there should be an appeal to the citizens of India also. We could have a Ukraine fund, and the government's own efforts could be complemented. And as always, we have seen that the Indian citizen has been very forthcoming, whether it's a flood or an earthquake or whenever there has been any kind of exigency where immediate humanitarian aid is called for. The citizen effort from civil society has been very, again, commendable. I hope that the Ukraine situation would elicit a similar response. It needs coordination.
Commodore Uday Bhaskar, thank you so very much for your detailed perspective.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
FIFA and Uefa have suspended Russian national teams and clubs from all international soccer competitions until further notice. The suspension, which comes after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, will likely leave the Russian team out of the upcoming World Cup in Qatar. FIFA oversees soccer worldwide, while Uefa, one of 6 continental organizations, governs the sport in Europe. Uefa also announced it ended its partnership with Gazprom, a Russian majority state-owned energy company that is one of Uefa's main sponsors. Oil prices on Tuesday surged around 4.5% as concerns over potential supply disruptions after Russia's military operation in Ukraine and related sanctions outweighing talks of a coordinated global crude stock release. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading around $102.50 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were at $99.40 per barrel.
In Australia, tens of thousands of people have been ordered to evacuate their homes by Tuesday, and many more have been told to prepare to flee as parts of Australia's southeast coast are inundated by the worst flooding in more than a decade that has claimed at least 10 lives. Scores of residents, some with pets, spent hours trapped on their roofs in recent days by a fast-rising river in the town of Lismore in northern New South Wales state. The body of a woman in her 80s was found by a neighbor in her Lismore home on Tuesday, a police statement said. At least 9 migrants died after their boat capsized off Tunisian coast, the Tunisian Defense Ministry said on Tuesday. The bodies were recovered by the country's coast guards, while 2 units of the Navy rescued 9 other migrants, including some in critical condition. They were from varying African nations, it said. Searches were still underway. The boat sank on Monday near the port of Mahdia in the central east region of Tunisia, from where many people try to cross the Mediterranean Sea to Europe.
The government of Bangladesh signed 2 separate agreements with the Asian Development Bank (ADB) for loans worth $292 million on Tuesday. The agreements were signed in Dhaka between Fatima Yasmin, Secretary Economic Relations Division, and Edimon Ginting, Country Director ADB. The first loan worth $157 is being provided to mitigate flood and riverbank erosion risks, strengthen climate resilience through structural and non-structural interventions, and promote knowledge-based solutions along the Jamuna, Padma and Ganges rivers in central Bangladesh. The ADB also approved an additional loan of $135 million to improve access to and quality of inclusive water supply services. The new U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh, Peter Haas, arrived in Dhaka on Tuesday. He most recently served as the U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State for Economic and Business Affairs. A tweet by the U.S. Embassy in Dhaka informed this. He will take the place of Earl R. Miller, who left for Washington almost a month back.
And now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let us take a look at the press reports in China. Prasar Bharati Beijing reported that Nepalese Parliament approved a $500 million U.S. government aid program, Millennium Challenge Corporation, despite objections from China and protests from communist parties, is drawing sharp response from China. Reacting to Nepal's Parliament's decision, a concerned China said on Monday that Washington should not undermine the sovereignty of other countries through coercive diplomacy. PTI reports that China, a close ally of Russia, said on Monday that it was opposed to illegal unilateral sanctions and will continue to carry out normal trade cooperation with Moscow as the US, EU and other allies stepped up punitive measures against Russia, including the interbank messaging system, SWIFT. The diplomat writes China was woefully unprepared for the Russia-Ukraine war. The fact that Beijing was caught off guard hints at the fragility of its partnership with Russia. Let us take a look at what made the headlines in Nepal. The Kathmandu Post reports that a day after Nepal Parliament ratified the Millennium Challenge Corporation Nepal Compact, China reacted on Monday saying that it has noted the ratification and the interpretative declaration. Let us have some brief news from Bangladesh. For the first time, Bangladesh has been elected President of the Executive Board of the United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, reports Daily Star. The 36-member Executive Board's world's largest humanitarian organization, based in Rome, unanimously elected Bangladesh as the President of the Board for 2022 in its first regular session on Monday. In shooting, Saurabh Chaudhary has clinched India's first gold medal at the ongoing International Sports Federation World Cup in Cairo, Egypt. The 19-year-old Indian on Tuesday defeated Michael Schwald of Germany 16-6 in the gold medal match of the men's 10-meter air pistol event. Russian Artem Chernusov grabbed a bronze medal. And a quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi shares a high-level meeting on Indian response to Ukraine situation. Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla says 12,000 Indian nationals out of 20,000 have left Ukraine so far. New Delhi to send 26 flights to bring out Indian citizens in next 3 days. From Ukraine, 9th Operation Ganga flight reaches New Delhi from Bucharest, Romania. An Indian student killed in shelling in Kharkiv, Ukraine. Government issues fresh advisory for Indians to leave Kyiv urgently. Union Minister General retired V.K. Singh reaches Poland to aid the evacuation of Indian citizens in Ukraine. And now, before we end, let's listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Bosnia on their Independence Day. And And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.